Viewers, before we dive in, drop your location and your local time in the comments. It's always wild to see where folks are tuning in from around the world. Now picture this. Eric Mason hasn't seen his lake in 8 long years. 8 years since the land was taken out from under him, bulldozed and reshaped into a playground for HOA royalty and their manicured suburban fiefdom. When he pulls off that gravel county road in a nondescript beige rental, the Montana air hits his face like an old friend, one that hasn't forgotten him. He stares across the shoreline that once held his family's cabin, and all he sees now are prefab mansions with names like Aspen Ridge, white fences gleaming like fake smiles, and HOA signs planted like warning flags. The only survivor is an oak tree his grandfather planted decades ago, standing stubborn as if to say, "I remember too." Eric keeps his return quiet, no triumphant announcement, no hint of his true name. In town he goes by an alias, rents a cottage where he can stay invisible, and begins what historians still argue is one of the sharpest examples of private justice in small-town property disputes. By day 2, he's already mapping the development, photographing angles, scribbling notes on who lives where, and realizing the empire on his father's land looks impressive only from a distance. He meets Randall Hoffman at a roadside diner, a PI with the moral compass of a pirate, but the nose of a bloodhound. Randall slides a manila folder across a sticky table. Inside are the inheritance documents signed, stamped and notarized back in 2017. The deed is clean, the ownership still Mason. Then Randall grins and points to something bizarre. The delinquent dues letter the HOA used to auction the land is signed by people who are already dead. Either fraud, he mutters, or necromancy. That folder feels heavier than a brick. Eric flips through the signatures, his father's handwriting there like a ghost, the county registrar's seal still fresh after all these years. Randall doesn't stop. He's dug up photos of Karen S. Nova, queen of the HOA, smiling alongside Judge Grant Miller at a ribbon cutting, both of them beaming like they'd cured cancer. Problem is, Judge Miller retired the very year Eric's land vanished in the so-called auction. Back at his rental, Eric spreads the development plans across the table, parcel numbers, sitting neatly on what used to be his family's stretch of earth. 12 lots, 12 thefts. He thinks of himself at 20, young, naive, too quick to sign paperwork without reading it. He remembers the bulldozers ripping out his dock before he even understood what the HOA was. But now he has an expensive, razor-sharp attorney named Sarah Delaney who doesn't deal in maybes. When he texts her about the forged documents, she fires back in seconds, "Let's burn this place to the ground." That night, Eric stares at the lake, shimmering in the moonlight, synthetic fences glowing in solar lights, HOA houses lining what used to be a sanctuary. They think he's gone, they think he's weak, they think time buried the Mason family. They're wrong. This isn't closure, this is ignition. Eric doesn't wait. The very next morning, Sarah Delaney files their first salvo, a document request so sharp it might as well be a guillotine. She invokes the Montana Open Records Act, demanding every scrap of HOA paperwork from the years surrounding the so-called auction minutes, emails, dues reports, all of it. This isn't a polite ask, it's a legal crowbar. Meanwhile, Eric buries himself in the dusty library stacks, scrolling through microfiche until the Deerfield Gazette blinks onto the screen. And there they are, Karen Nova and Judge Miller again, all smiles with golden shovels at a groundbreaking. Karen calls his family's cabin underutilized space. Historians still argue whether those two words have ever sounded colder. He prints the page, adds it to the growing arsenal, and realizes every ribbon cutting is just another breadcrumb on the trail of arrogance. Randall keeps feeding him ammo fake debt notices signed by ghost trace signatures, even a contractor's thumb drive full of off-book payments and redrawn parcel lines. It's like peeling wallpaper in an old house. Behind one rotten layer is another and another until the studs are bare. The fraud isn't sloppy, it's bold. They never expected him to come back. Eric shakes his head at his younger self, the kid who didn't know the difference between a lien and a latte, who signed whatever form stopped the phone from ringing after his father died. But that kid's gone. This Eric saved every dime gutting fish in Alaska, hauling lumber in Oregon, and selling furniture off the back of a pickup. He didn't come home swinging a stick, he came home with a wrecking ball. Still, the HOA doesn't fight with paperwork alone. One evening, pushing a grocery cart through Wilson's market lot, he hears the one voice he never forgot, Karen. She leans against her Lexus sunglasses, too big smirk sharp enough to cut glass. She mocks his family's filthy shack and brags about what they've built. Eric lets her bask, then leans in close. Enjoy it while you can, preferably from behind bulletproof glass in federal court. For just a second, her smirk cracks. Then it's gone, but Eric sees it. Fear. That night, a brick lands on his porch, wrapped in a note, "Leave town while you still can." The sheriff's deputy shrugs, no cameras, no plates, not much to do. But Eric doesn't spook easy. He installs a web of infrared cameras, motion lights, cloud backups. Sure enough, days later, the footage catches a hooded figure crawling under his truck at 2:40 a.m., slicing his brake lines clean through. Not a prank, not kids, attempted murder. One frame shows a patch on the sleeve, the gold emblem of Lakeview Shore Security. Karen hasn't just threatened him, she's escalated to blood. Sarah's voice is like steel when he calls time to go loud. Within days, subpoenas are flying, protective orders filed, state investigators looped in, residents whisper, journalists poke around, the HOA board sweats. Even neighbors start showing up on Eric's porch. People like Peter Malden, a retired teacher who bought what he thought was a dream home, now learning it was built on stolen soil. Eric shakes his hand, promises he's not the enemy, draws up a fair lease so Peter won't lose his house. And word spreads this fight isn't about erasing lives, it's about erasing fraud. The machine is breaking down one frightened whisper at a time. The cracks widen into an earthquake. Randall traces HOA funds into a shell company called Nova Land Holdings, founded by none other than Karen S. Nova, just months before Eric's land was seized. Money funneled through fake grants property, flipped at laughably low prices. It isn't just fraud, it's racketeering dressed in khakis. Then comes the real dynamite, a USB from a law clerk who once interned for Judge Miller. Inside are emails between the judge and Karen, swapping timelines, routing notices through hidden P.O. boxes, joking that the boy had taken the bait. Eric stares at the screen, jaw tight. His father's legacy reduced to casserole talk between crooks. Sarah nearly spits her tea when she reads it. This isn't civil anymore. This is criminal conspiracy. Historians still argue whether that email chain was the single most self-incriminating set of documents ever seen in Montana property law. The tide turns. A citizens group forms petitions, circulate cameras, start showing up at meetings. Karen tries to plug the leaks, firing lawyers, preaching optics over honesty, but it's like bailing water from a sinking ship with a thimble. Then comes the town hall. The air buzzes with tension, journalists whispering, residents clutching phones. Sarah takes the podium and lays it bare, forged notices signed by the dead brake line sabotage, WhatsApp logs of guards bragging about neutralizing trespassers, and finally the emails between Karen and Judge Miller. The room gasps. Someone drops a coffee cup, and Detective Finch from the state task force steps forward with words sharp as knives. She lists charges: wire fraud, forgery, attempted vehicular assault, and right on cue, officers cuff Karen Nova in front of everyone. She shrieks about smear campaigns, but no one listens. Her throne has turned to ash. 68 days later, Eric hears the ruling echo across the courtroom. All prior transactions void, full ownership restored. The HOA dissolved, assets liquidated, Judge Miller disgraced. Karen staring down 15 years in prison. Residents who were tricked into buying homes get fair leases under Eric's name, legal, honest, humane. A few refuse and see their houses come down, brick by stolen brick. Eric stands once again where his grandfather's cabin used to be, and slowly, plank by plank, he rebuilds it. This time the sign out front reads, Mason Family Property, never HOA. The wind down of the storm isn't loud, it's steady. Imagine Eric on the rebuilt porch as twilight settles the lake, catching the last orange flickers of sun. His hands are rough from hammering his heart a little steadier now that justice has been carved from stone. The oak tree still stands nearby, roots deeper than any fraudulent deed leaves swaying as though whispering welcome home. For a long time he just listens, the soft lap of water, the creak of fresh boards, the silence finally free of engines and bulldozers. The fight is over, and what remains isn't anger, but something softer, like the hush that follows a storm when the air feels clean again. The houses across the way still stand, families inside, carrying on children playing where lies once grew. He doesn't hate them. He never did. His fight was never with the people caught in the machine, only with the machine itself. If you close your eyes, you can almost smell the pine again. Hear the crackle of a fire by the dock. Feel the kind of peace that belongs to land restored to its rightful hands. Justice doesn't always roar it, sometimes sighs, sometimes heals, sometimes rebuilds quietly while the rest of the world looks away. And as night finally folds over the water, Eric leans back on his chair, lets out a breath he's been holding for 8 long years, and smiles, not in victory, but in belonging. The lake is his again. The story has ended. The silence stays.